Yo guys, this is Reinhardt, and this is gonna be rant about Ashran. This is gonna be our Monday show where we're gonna call it GRRrr Mondays. And on Mondays we're gonna be ranting about stuff that just does not make any sense at all from our design or from our consumer perspective. Now, this is to say some it's gonna be Tuesday, some it's gonna be Monday, of course. But for me it's Monday, so let's get started. First of all, everybody voted on my Facebook page that they wanted to do Ashran rant over the Entitled Gamers, and I think Entitled Gamers is also going to be a good rant, so I'm going to rant about it next week, and you're going to see in depth what I mean and the perspective of us. And in fact I just want to give a really big spin on the whole this Ashran Worlds of Draenor really quickly. But anyway, so let's actually rant about the Ashran. But I think that a lot of people kind of miss the conception of the Ashran and miss that the problem with the Ashran is actually it's not two main problems, that there's too much PvE going on, or that there is the Ashran is forcing you to do something. It's two biggest misconceptions. I think the reason why Ashran sucks is because it's a very, very poor design, and the design was actually derived from us, and I'll explain to you in just a moment. So let's get started. First of all, I want to shout out two biggest things. Well, the first one is people think that Ashran is you are forced to do Ashran. And I think people kind of don't understand the conception of being forced, because the concept of being forced is something like when you try to get into the game and you automatically ported to Ashran, where you have to complete the entire Ashran first before you can play the game. That is being forced. The idea, if you voluntarily queuing and nobody's standing behind putting the gun to your head or to my head, here, do Ashran or we will shoot you, then it's more like incentivizing. So Ashran is more like incentivizing. Now, here is the problem with the Ashran, is that right now, from what I understood in the reading on the Momo Champion, the only thing that's going to be available to Ashran only are the trinkets. And me playing Unholy Decay and heavily relying on the mastery above anything else for PvP, and my class and spec isn't the greatest, actually, yes, I have to do Ashran on my Decay every single week, and probably on my luck as well to get that haste trinket and actually try it out, and I think it's going to be best in slot for me. So anyway, so that problem is asinine. To have a random chance to drop something that you just completely forced to do it on a random chance basis, yes, to me that does not make any sense, especially when the chance is just so low. Now, with that said, Ashran is not forcing you to do something. You're not forced to do Ashran. It's more like incentivizing, okay? Let's put it this way. If you play 8-bit Nintendo games and you play that Contra game where you go and shoot everything up, you are forced to shoot everything because they will shoot you back. That's forcing, right? No. In any game, you're forced to do something. So the forcing is not, it should be out of the question. It's more that the random chance that actually sucks, even for the trinkets. The second, and they actually heard the feedback and they listened to that feedback and they actually changed that. And to them, the majority of it, and kind of a kudos to them, but please don't go out there putting a googly eyes on yourself and thinking, oh, Blizzard is finally listening to our feedback. No, okay, that's just a poor thing to say. In my opinion, if the government of the United States say, you know what, we're gonna shoot every single person tomorrow, and then 2 hours later, you know what, we'll listen to your feedback and we decided not to shoot everybody tomorrow and let you guys live and enjoy our clean air with the pollution and carbon dioxide. Well, guess what? That is really not listening to feedback. If you're making some kind of a terrible change that nobody likes and everybody protests about it and you finally change it back, it's not really listening to feedback, it's not implementing a terrible change or being late to revert the change back. So that's kind of a thing. Now, the second part of the Ashran, where people say, there is just too much PvE. Well, first of all, Ashran mechanically, I'm gonna address in just a second, design-wise, it's a terrible, terrible zone. But the problem with the Ashran, it's not the PvE portion of it, okay? And it does feel like a quest zone. I feel like I'm in a freaking Westfall or free-for-all with a bunch of hordes running around and raping innocent alliance. And that's my perception of the Ashran. It's a quest zone. But it's not the PvE portion of it. In fact, if you take a look at it, League of Legends, one of the most competitive, highly competitive ranked PvP games, all of a sudden does not have a lot of PvP going on. In fact, there's more PvE than PvP in that game, because you are forced to get those minion kills, to get that gold, to actually pimp out your character. So in that sense, yeah, there actually legitimately is a lot of PvE in that game. And everybody loves that game from a PvP perspective and calls it a PvP game. So mechanically wise, PvE is not a problem. And now let's go a little bit back to the two previous expansions that I played personally. If we take Wintergrass, for example, and Tolbarat, while some people didn't like it, the majority of the community actually loved those maps. And they loved those maps like wholeheartedly. Everybody, even in Ashran, would say, I'll take Wintergrass or Tolbarat over this shit any day. And yes, that is true. Those were mechanically fun. Alright, now, if you think that those did not force you to PvE, you are freaking idiot, okay? Not only you had to kill catapults, you had to kill siege engines, you had to kill towers, you had to do all of that stuff. In the meantime, trying to PvP at the same time, you are also legitimately had to create 10 or 25 man raids. Go out there, DPS the boss. I'm not kidding. Get the trash loot, go. DPS the boss. Kill the boss, which had a random chance of dropping the gear. That was up to raid leader to decide who's that gear going to. Hence, there was so much drama of that loot pieces of gear that was dropped. And that place was dropping both PvP and PvE items. Okay? And those places were forcing you to PvE more than Ashran, multiplied by 20. But the problem why people think that Ashran has too much PvE is because of a poor constructed map. That's the problem, and that's what we're going to be ranting about, is that the awful design of Ashran. Whew. Small drink. Now let's rant about it. So, and let's break it apart and just poop all over Ashran. So, first of all, the problem with the Ashran is the design. It's a quest zone, it's terrible zone, and I will make a suggestions how to actually even make the Ashran better for this expansion. And how to move forward, create a better zones just like Ashran. Because I think overall, Ashran, Wintergrass, Tolbarat is actually a good mechanic and a good zone. It just needs a proper design. So, let's rant. If we take Ashran, for example, in the Ashran, there's a 4 event, 1, and then kill the main boss. Like, killing the main boss is not a problem. It's always happening half the time. When your party get raped on the events, usually you sneakily go and kill the enemy leader, and nobody gives a shit about that. Because for one leader that you need to kill, you need to get 4 events going. Now, that is the problem, is that actually, in fact, most encouraging would be to actually kill the main leader or defend your leader, not to actually kill zones. But let's not talk about that. Though events forces us, literally, you're in that map, that's literally forcing almost to go and participate in the events. When you go as the entire raid of like 30 people and you fight 30 horde, you have group lump sum of 60 people. Now don't get me wrong, I have a pretty good computer that shits on me every now and then via random errors, but I have a good computer where I can run WoW and Rift on the ultra graphics and participate in 2 battlegrounds at the same time. I actually did it a couple times. So I have a decent computer, but even then, my computer have a tendency to lag when there's a 60 people, all those particles effects and the spells flying back and forth in Kia, Ninja Pando, and shit like that. And guess what? You kind of create a lag fest. Now, the thing is, then it becomes, the Ashran becomes, ultimately, is a machine versus a machine. Fucking Terminator the Salvation, or Terminator, where there's Terminator 101 versus a liquid metal mortal. That's the problem with the Ashran. It's there where your computer is battling others' computer, and whoever has a better computer in the middle of a huge Zerg wins. And the second battle in Ashran, it's not you, it's not as a player, it's also your internet providers are actually fighting against each other. Who has the better internet provider and can load the enemies and the particles effects faster? So that should be a main advertisement, I think, in the internet providers. Subscribe to Cox Communications because we can load Ashran in under 4 seconds between the 20 versus 20 fight. And then the Central Link will come in and say, well, we can do it within 5 seconds. That type of thing. So yeah, that's the problem. The problem begins your hardware and your internet provider. The amount of money you put into the gaming becomes a major controlling factor in that big battles because your shit just does not load properly. Now, for those people who cannot afford a good computers and who cannot afford a great internet, or who live in the remote areas and cannot get a good internet, that's where it becomes a problem. Not only those people are going to be missing out on the fights, or if they're going to come in the fights, they're going to lock themselves up to death. Your entire raid turns around and shits on those people and cusses them out and tries to kick them and tries to derogate them. And guess what? For those people, they have nothing else to do. They cannot go and do any other events because those events are locked out. There's only one event happening on the map, and it kind of forces into this big, huge mash pile of Zerg. Okay? Now, guess what? Guess what? The idea of massive PvP battles was a feedback of a community, of a Dinkelbergs like us. Okay? I'm not talking you exactly, or me exactly, because I didn't do that suggestion. I think it's us now, but people literally made a shitty feedback saying, yeah, we want to see massive PvP battles. And guess what developers did? They gave you the massive PvP battles. And guess what? That does not work. But a lot of people, rather than looking at the mirror and saying, yeah, maybe we did give Blizzard a terrible feedback and they listened to us, and where they shouldn't have listened to us, but they did listen to us on that feedback. That's the problem becomes, essentially. Now, the problem with the Ashran and the core identity of it is that you as an individual player cannot make a big difference. And that's why Tolbarat and Wintergrad shit all over Ashran or trash can or whatever you can call it. Okay, it's not because, oh my god, Holinka is a terrible designer ever created. It's not because he's actually even bad designer, or he has a full control over Ashran, or it's not. No, it's us. We gave a bad feedback, and they took a bad feedback. Okay, here's the thing. The potatoes should not give a bad feedback. Who should not give feedbacks at all, right? That's the problem arises, is that when a bad feedback goes up the chain and the top listens to that bad feedback and implements it, it potentially can hurt a lot more than the 10 good feedbacks combined. And that's the problem with the Ashran. This is just a very, very safe, monotone map where they thought that the safest route to take is to provide those big PvP battles, and the creativity in terms of events and everything else went in there. No doubt about it. The creativity of making a zone went. But it also was in vain because mechanically the map is just too simple. Right? If I take Wintergrad, for example, I was on a server of a Netheron. Netheron, it was the server where Horde was shitting on Alliance. We were outnumbered, 48,000 Horde to 15,000 Alliance, 3-1. Every single time we would get into Wintergrad, we would mostly lose. Until I personally got tired, and I was not even high rated back then. I was like 1700-1800 rated. Guess what I did? I made my own group of 5 people, okay? And we actually went out there and shit all over Horde. Why? Because our small group was able to defend our towers when we were defending, or annihilate the towers, escort the catapults, and have this lots of mini fights going on where our group made a difference. And that's what the Ashran missing. Ashran is missing is a priority of a small PvP group fights, 3v3, 4v4, 5v5, maybe even 7 versus 7, but not anything above 20, not 20 versus 20, because it becomes too monotone. You as an individual player has very small control over it. So the idea how to fix Ashran is actually very, very simple. Make all the events happening at the same time. Literally every single event happening at the same time. Okay? And guess what? When you do that and your side wins, you get extra coins, currency for that big motherfucking summon that comes into your base. And make that summon is actually truly a badass. Give him like 100 million HP. Okay? And make him extremely truly strong, so he can actually push out completely easily. Get rid of those Warsong gladiators, or I don't know, whoever. Get rid of that pieces of those shitty freaking mobs with 1 or 2 shots people. No, that doesn't make any sense, right? Make actually people, players, defending instead of the NPCs. And guess what? In case if you really want to have a lot of small NPCs running there, make them your followers that you get from your garrison. That would be a lot more fun, would add a lot more depth into it. Now, on the contrary, people say, well, I'm forced, like I have to do the garrison to be somewhat useless. Well, news for you. For a design to have a good design and the proper design, you sometimes have to do something. So get off your lazy ass, whoever you are, and do it. I don't mean you as a viewer shouldn't do it, but I'm talking about in general, that a lot of people want to take their shit for granted and just not work for anything. And when you create a game like that, and that's what the World of GRRrr is, that's why everybody stops having fun, because there's no truly a challenge, and when there's no truly a challenge, there's no truly a good reward for it, essentially. So that's how I would design the action. Multiple battles happening at the same time across multiple events, everything working towards contributing to your main base. And that's where the group of 5 people can easily go from event to event, help wiping the horde. That's where the small fights, kind of like a mini arena fights happening, would make a huge difference in the game, and I think that would create a lot of depth to it as well. Moving forward, if I would design something like an Ashran zone myself personally, what I would design is actually something very simple. I would design a zone kind of like a Tamarian jungle. Let me see really quickly. Tannen jungle or something like that, where there's literally an open world PvP, there's a towers and something like that, close to maybe like Alterac Valley type of thing going on. Or maybe kind of like a mini MOBA map on a map where the constant fighting between Horde and Alliance happening, lots of people dying and shit like that, and you help push your lanes out, and you just kind of like do that, and you maybe get some specific resources and you build up the resources, you summon the garrison, build up the complexity of the map. I am pretty sure Blizzard have enough resources to build it up, okay? But the biggest thing is, the biggest challenge I think is, we give a terrible feedback to the people, where people then make a terrible freaking maps. And I think that's what happened with the Ashran, on top of the maybe laziness of the design itself. So that's the idea. The garrison has to be tied to something, Ashran, because otherwise it feels completely worthless and pointless. Individual cannot make a big difference in the Ashran and at all. Right now, yes, somebody can take a raid group and yell at everybody else to do the right thing, and people eventually start listening and they push it forward and they do something. But overall, and the majority of the times, the reason why people like Ashran is because they cannot make a good impact. And when World of Warcraft rose us like we're champions of the Alliance, my friends, and we feel like a dog shit when we lose every single fight to a big Zerg, that's because the problem. There's no individualistic, there's no something that if I'm a better skilled player than somebody else, I can make a big difference. There's not much of a room for that. The gap in terms of the potato and the skilled player in Ashran is ultimately small. But if you can split it up, the entire Ashran, and do multiple events at the same time, then those players who actually try hard and want to make a big difference can make a big difference in the game. And that's what my rant is concluded. I'm sorry, I did not shit all over the Ashran. I didn't derogatory insult at anybody else, but I don't think there's a need to do that. Okay? When I go to the WoW forums, I feel terrible when the people get insulted there so much, and the developers and the community managers who actually work their ass off to provide with their like legitimately, like they're trying. Okay? Here's what I don't understand. Like why everybody thinks that biggest thing that Holinka thinks about is create the most terrible design possible. No, it's not, okay? There's a multiple things in the work, and it's a corporation, and we need to understand that in the corporate world, it's not easy to make changes. But regardless of that, that's my idea of the Ashran. Let me know what you think below, and as always, guys, thank you for watching, and do svidaniya. And make sure you follow me on the Facebook, which is going to be a link in the description down below.